you want quick tips that will help you win at No Limit Hold'em, listen up. We've compiled 10 basic but critical tactics that will make you a more confident and profitable poker player. This list of tips is from the most popular article ever on upswingpoker.com. It's helped well over 1 million readers up their game. Keep in mind that none of this is complex cutting-edge strategy. It's just 10 fundamental pieces of advice that you'd be smart to remember at the table. The majority of new poker players start out by playing way too loose, and that's why tip number 1 is to play fewer hands and play them aggressively. Put simply, there is a limit on how many starting hands you can profitably play before the flop. If you play too loose, like by limping in with queen 6 suited or calling a raise every single time you have a suited connector, you'll find yourself bleeding chips way too often. Developing a solid preflop strategy is by far the easiest and fastest way to improve your bottom line. You can start studying battle-tested preflop ranges now by signing up for our Preflop Prodigy app at upswingpoker.com/preflop. It is totally free. You can use it on any device with an internet connection. But keep in mind that having the discipline to stick to preflop ranges that you studied can be difficult. This is a word of warning. Don't allow yourself to get impatient and play a hand that's not worth playing. That will really hurt your wallet over time. The best overall approach when raising as the first player to enter a pot is to play a range of strong and/or playable hands, and you should play all of those hands aggressively. Playing all of your hands aggressively, including the more speculative ones like 7-6 suited or pocket 5s, allows you to disguise the strength of your actual hand. When you raise, your opponents won't know whether you have pocket aces, ace-king, or one of those speculative hands like 7-6 suited, and that makes you super tough to play against. Put simply, tight and aggressive wins the game. Before I move on to tip number 2, I want to reiterate that you are just a few clicks away from the fastest way to upgrade your preflop skills. Head over to upswingpoker.com/preflop and enter your info to sign up for the free Preflop Prodigy app. This app works on a phone or computer, any device really with an internet connection, and it includes battle-tested ranges for live cash games, online cash games, and tournaments. There are 3 stack depths for tournaments right now, and we have some loose plans to add more ranges to this tool over time. So head over there, check it out. While it's still free, make sure you get your access and start improving your game right now. It's great to use this tool to look up how you should have played a hand or to study ahead of time so you know what you're going to do when you get to the table. Tip number 2 is another key one for beginners. Don't be the first player to limp. You should generally avoid open limping or just calling the big blind preflop for 2 main reasons. Number 1, you have fewer ways to win the pot. You'll have to catch something on the flop. That's pretty much your only avenue to taking it down. Number 2 is you give the players behind very enticing pot odds, making it more likely that you'll face multiple players, and thus even less likely that you will win the pot. By raising instead of limping, you can occasionally take the pot down preflop or win with a c-bet on the flop, and that c-bet is more likely to work since you narrowed the field with your preflop raise. Keep in mind, it is much more reasonable to limp when at least one other player has already limped. This is called over-limping, and it can be a good play because you're getting good pot odds to join the action. Plus, that player who limped clearly didn't watch this video and is probably worth targeting. So, feel free to toss in that one big blind with certain hands that play well in multi-way pots. That includes hands like low pocket pairs and small suited aces. Basically, hands that can easily hit the flop really hard and win a big pot. Psst, there are actually some situations in which open limping can help you win extra money, but it's a fairly advanced play and it requires a well-thought-out approach to pull off. If you'd like to see a video covering those exceptions, situations where you can open limp, let me know in the comments down below. Tip number 3 is to semi-bluff aggressively with your draws. If you want to truly crush poker, you need to bluff effectively. You can't just sit around waiting for strong hands. But attempting bad bluffs is one of the fastest ways to lose money at the table. So, how do you walk that line when you're first starting out? The effective way to bluff is to let the cards you have dictate whether or not you're going to pull the trigger. The most obvious example of that is bluffing with hands that have outs to improve to the best hand on a later street. So I'm talking about when you have a straight draw, a flush draw, or even just an overcard or two to the board. Think of your outs to improve as your backup plan. Your bluff might just work, you might win the pot like that, but if your bluff does get called, you have that escape hatch, you have that backup plan in the form of your outs. These hands are often referred to as semi-bluffs because of their potential beyond the bluff itself. Let me just quickly go over an example. Let's say you have 9-7 of diamonds, the flop comes 10-8-2 with 2 diamonds, so you have an open-ended straight draw, you have a flush draw, you check, your opponent bets, and you decide to check raise as a semi-bluff. You might just get your opponent to fold, that would be great, but if your opponent does call, you can still improve on the turn or river. For the record, advanced players also bluff when they have good blockers or unblockers in their hand. When you're just starting out, though, bluffing with total nothing hands prior to the river is not advisable, except in one situation that I'll tell you about in a little bit. Tip number 4 is to fast play your strong hands so you can build the pot and make more money. Slow playing too often is a mistake commonly made among players who are afraid of chasing their opponent out of the pot. They have a strong hand, they need to lay the trap because they're afraid of losing their customer, but that's not the best way to approach it. In most cases, it's best to just bet your strong hands because it allows you to build the pot and protect your equity. But I'm not saying you should never slow play. You definitely can. If it's unlikely that you're going to be outdrawn, for example, if you have pocket kings on a king-king 3 flop, you can definitely consider slow playing. It's just going to be tough for your opponent to have a hand that can actually call, and they're not going to outdraw you anyway, so you might as well give them some rope. Additionally, if your opponent's range is heavily weighted towards hands with no showdown value, you can consider laying the trap. In other words, if your opponent probably just doesn't have anything and you're gonna force them to fold by betting, you might as well check and give them a chance to bet. And finally, if the board is very bad for your range, you can consider slow playing with your strong hands too. For example, let's say you raise preflop and the big blind calls, the flop comes 7-6-5, so very connected board that hits the big blind's range well. The big blind could have 2 pair or straight quite easily. You can check behind when they check with a hand as strong as pocket aces or even a straight yourself. That way you protect all of the medium strength hands in your range just in case the big blind comes out firing on the turn. That last point is a little bit more advanced, but it's something that I just have to mention because it's a key part of how poker works when it comes to slow playing and fast playing. Tip number 5 is to defend your big blind with the right hands. The big blind is a special position because you already have an investment in the pot. You basically get a discount to call any raise. Because of this discount and the fact that you are the last person to act preflop, you can profitably call with a lot more hands than if you were sitting in another position. That's not to say you should call raises with trash hands like 9-5 offsuit, but the more borderline hands like King 9 offsuit or Queen 6 suited become playable in many situations. Exactly how wide you should defend from the big blind depends on a multitude of factors. Here are the 4 main ones. Number 1, the position of the raiser. You should play tighter against the earlier positions and looser against the late positions. Number 2 is the number of players in the hand. When one or more players has already called the raise in front of you, play tighter and only call with hands that play well in multi-way pots. And again, that's like low pocket pairs and suited aces are the best examples. Number 3 is the size of the raise. This one's pretty obvious, but the larger the raise size, the tighter you should play, and vice versa. Finally, stack sizes are critical as well. When you're short stack, you should play fewer speculative hands and prioritize high card strength. That's kind of an oversimplification, but for the sake of this video, it's a solid starting point. There are other important factors too, like how aggressive your opponent is going to play post-flop, but the 4 we just covered are the main ones you should consider in pretty much every hand when you're facing a raise from the big blind. I've pulled up the Preflop Prodigy app on my screen so we can look at some theoretically optimal big blind defense ranges. And if you're listening to this rather than watching it, I'm going to go through and explain this in a way that I think will still have value for you, even if you can't see what I'm clicking through. So right now I'm looking at the big blind versus under the gun range. So we're facing this 3 big blind raise, and we're playing a little over 15% of hands against this raise. We're playing a good amount of hands, but it's still fairly tight, and I'm going to use king-queen offsuit as our sort of barometer hand as we click through more ranges here. So against under the gun, king-queen offsuit is mostly folding. It's calling the raise 8% of the time and folding 92% of the time. Solvers love to do this. They love to mix between 2 different actions that it deems to have similar value. So again, we're playing 15% of hands and mostly folding king-queen offsuit. If we move 1 position over, so now it's 1 to the left of under the gun raising, king-queen offsuit is now being played nearly a third of the time, and our overall defense has ticked a little bit closer to 16%. Now let's move over 1 more position to middle position, so we're the big blind facing middle position, and now king-queen offsuit is calling the vast majority of the time, 82%, and our overall range has ticked up to about 19%. Now we'll go to the low jack, that's 1 more position over, and all of the sudden, king-queen offsuit is being played every single time, and we're playing over 20% of hands against the low jack player. This continues on versus the hijack, where now we're playing nearly 24% of hands. Against the cutoff, we're playing nearly 29% of hands, and hands as weak as king-jack offsuit and king-10 offsuit are being played at a high frequency. And finally, against the button, we're playing nearly 40% of hands, and that king-queen offsuit I was talking about, we're not calling it every time, we're actually re-raising with it about half the time. So that's a big difference looking at how we played versus under the gun and how we played versus the button. That was really focused on position, that first factor I mentioned, but it kind of underscores how important it is to study ranges like this, and the Preflop Prodigy app is a great way to do that. Tip number 6 is lame advice, but I just have to say it. When you're unsure, just fold. Want to know the biggest difference between a bad player and a professional player? The good player has the ability to lay down a relatively strong hand like top pair when they think they're beat. This advice sounds really simple, but it's actually hard to do in practice because of the way our brains are wired. We are naturally curious, and we naturally want to win. When we fold, we surrender our chance to win the pot, and we don't get to satisfy our curiosity. We don't get to find out what our opponent had. So really, when you do this, you're fighting your own human nature, so it can be fairly difficult. But it's crucial, because calling too often and in the wrong situations is another common way novice players bleed money. Whenever you're unsure whether to call or fold versus a bet, do yourself a service and just fold. But here's the key pro tip. When you fold in one of these situations, don't just move on and forget the hand ever happened. Note down the details and investigate later. Discuss the hand with fellow poker players, maybe in our Upswing Poker Discord, which you can join for free at discord.gg/upswing. Or you could talk about it with your friends in real life or study online. Whatever you gotta do to get to the bottom of that hand and figure out what you should have done. That way you can take the knowledge to the table in your next session. If you're getting value from this video and want to see more, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps us keep the content train rolling and ensures you don't miss what we put out. We release videos and podcasts regularly, and our mission is to help you improve your game for free. We want the time you spend watching these videos and listening to these podcasts to pay dividends at the table. Tip number 7 is to attack when your opponent shows weakness. Players really don't check as often as they should with hands that can actually call multiple bets. That means that when they do check, they usually have a relatively weak hand, and you can get them to fold it with some aggression. This is that bluffing with nothing situation that I alluded to earlier. When your opponent shows a lot of weakness in a heads-up pot, like by checking on the flop and then following that up with another check on the turn, that's the green light for you to go after them with an aggressive bluffing strategy. Not only should you bet with your usual semi-bluff hands that we talked about earlier, you should also bet with some pure nothing hands. Just go after them. Ideally, you should use hands that have good blocker effects. And if you want to learn about how to use blockers in your poker strategy generally, check out the episode we did on whether or not blockers actually matter. I'll put a link to that one in the description. It's time to talk briefly about tournaments specifically, and the tip for tournaments, tip number 8, is to play solid poker early on and don't worry about survival. There is a time and a place for stack preservation, and the beginning of a poker tournament is not it. This is one of the most misunderstood aspects of tournament poker strategy among beginners. Consider that in order to finish in the money in a tournament, you're going to have to at least double or triple your starting stack, usually more. So instead of playing defensively early on and trying to survive, you should be playing a solid and aggressive strategy in order to build up a stack and set yourself up for a deep run. If you find yourself short stacked near the money bubble or a pay jump, it's then that you should start playing a more survival-oriented strategy. I made another video with 7 great tips that will help you run deep in more tournaments. I'm going to drop a link to that at the end of this one. Anyway, let's move on to tip number 9, which is kind of more of a mental game thing, and it's only play if you feel like it. Poker should be fun. It should be a fun experience, regardless if you play as a hobby or if you're a professional player. You are going to perform your best when you're happy. So it makes sense that you should only play this mentally intensive game when you feel that way. If you feel frustration, fatigue, or anger building up, you should generally just quit your session right then and there, or at least take a break. You are very likely saving yourself a bunch of money by doing so. Poker will still be there tomorrow. Here's a pro tip from me. I've been playing poker for 15 years. I was a professional player for 6 years. Before I play a session, I imagine going all in and losing my stack on the very first hand. It's something that's very possible. If the thought of that possibility doesn't bother me, I know I'm ready to play my A game for that poker session. But if going all in and losing one of my buy-ins on the first hand sounds unbearable, I'd reconsider playing. Our final tip, tip number 10, is to only play in good games. It was said in Rounders, 20 years ago, that if you can't spot the sucker in your first half an hour at the table, then you are the sucker. You should always put yourself in positions where your chance to win is the largest. That's why it's so important to leave your ego at the door when playing poker. Bottom line is, you need to be better than at least half the players at the table if you want to have a positive win rate. And if you want to make sick good profit, you want to play against the worst players you can find. Here is a simple and quick 3-step checklist that will help you know if you're in a good game. Number 1, at least one player is limping in regularly. Number 2, there are many multi-way pots. And number 3, re-raises are either very rare or very frequent, both of which can indicate a really good game, just very different types of good games. If you're at a table with at least 2 of these boxes checked, you're in a great position to make money. If none of these boxes are checked, especially if you're playing low stakes, get up and go find a more profitable table. That is, unless you feel like putting yourself to the test. If you're ready to upgrade your tournament game next, watch this video. It's helped over 100,000 players, and only a few of the comments call me gay.